Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions of the Warhammer 40k universe. I hope you enjoyed my introduction to the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum. So, now let us explore the faction in more detail. Today, let us discuss one of the most iconic figures in the Guard, but also in the Warhammer 40k setting in its entirety. Today, we shall discuss the Commissars. The entire 221st Born Regiment was present, column after column of Imperial Guard as far as the eye could see, the ranks as deep as an ocean. The parade ground was hard and it was cold, yet none moved. They had been waiting for more than an hour as the one man simply stared at them. Some could barely make him out, but all looked. Commissar Rickard was stood upon a raised platform, alone except for a huge vid display behind him. It dwarfed his form, swathed in black overcoat and black peaked hat as it was. His eyes seemed to be the only thing that anyone could see, but they were enough. They cowed all who met them, no matter the distance. All present knew he was staring at them. Just them. This one man stared down an entire regiment for over an hour before he took 2 steps forward. Upon his moving, the entire sea of men and women before him involuntarily went to take a step backwards, but none actually moved. Rickard's hand was on his bolt pistol, and his reputation stated he could hit someone between the eyes 20 ranks in. None moved. He did not use a vox. He did not need one. His stentorian tones, much higher than his usual speaking voice, would carry to the ears of every man and woman present words that would echo in their ears and be carved upon their hearts from this day onwards. Thus he intoned, "I am ashamed. I am ashamed on your behalf. Never before have I been asked to lower myself so. Never. But I am here. And here you are. Here you are. Your bodies should be festooning the walls of approaches. Your bodies should be heaped before the ramparts of your enemies. Your bodies should be covered in your own and the blood of your enemies. Your souls should be with the Emperor at his side. Your bodies should be awash with medals. Your banners heaving with the pennants of glories fought and won. Yet here you are." When I was handed my posting, I had to read it thrice. The first time was a shock so mighty I could not believe it. The second time I had to stop, due to the tears that drowned my eyes. Tears. The third was to make certain I had read them correctly at all. But there was no mistake. There was no way to misconstrue the message. I am ashamed that I had to ever read the words it contained. I am ashamed for you. Ashamed. You have broken in the face of the enemy. You have refused an order to re-engage. You refused to embark on your transports. With his hands behind his back, Rickard now drew himself up to his full height, but none met his gaze. His voice began to raise, and it seemed to echo from the very heart of the planet they were now standing on. You will notice that your previous shepherds, your previous officers and commissars are not present. This is because I will not blame the flock for the failings of their shepherds. If I had, you would not be here. The huge vid screen then lit up. The regiment looked as one at the screen, most thankful to not be required to look at Rickard, even for an instant. Alas, they were soon to regret this temporary feeling of relief. On the screen were the previous officers and the commissars. One by one, Rickard slowly tortured them to death in front of the entire regiment. The horrors that were projected on the screen would usually make any of the soldiers standing there lose their last meal. Would make any of them turn away out of revulsion and dread. But they stood, transfixed, as the mutilation and death poured itself into their souls via the receptacles of their eyes. Nor could they escape by simply closing their eyes, as the deafening screeches of the victims tore through their ears and minds, would harrow them until their death. For 8 hours, they were subjected to this barbaric assault on their senses and sensibilities. By the time it was over, many were openly weeping, but none looked away. Rickard was watching them. As the last officer was scraped off the floor and discarded, the vid ended abruptly, and all were forced to then return their gaze to the lone black-clad man standing still. After 8 hours of horror, he had not moved a muscle. He still glared at them. The contempt that was emanating from him was as real as the cold. It seeped into the regiment, but was so much more now. Now they did not have rumours and reputation to define their instinctual reactions. They had cold, hard facts. They had experience. The fear was so much more. Many felt that they could almost chew it, if any movement whatsoever was not likely to bring immediate execution. Rickard opened his mouth, and what could only be described by every man and woman there was a whisper emanating. A whisper to each of them standing there. A whisper it felt that only they could hear, but all heard it. All. Now, when an order is given, any order, you will just have to ask yourself one very simple question. 1. Do I fear the enemy? Do I fear death? Do I fear the cursing of my soul by the Emperor? Do I fear these things more than me? In the years that followed, the 221st Born Regiment was known for their unquenchable zeal. They never broke again. If the Imperium is seen as a body, then there is a function for every part. The High Lords of Terror are the brain, the Inquisition, the nose and the antibodies, the white cells. The Administratum are the nervous system, the Guard are the sinew, its strength, the people, its blood. The Mechanicus is its hands, and the Ecclesiarchy is its soul. The Marines are its teeth, and the Navy its legs and trampling feet. But the Commissariat, the Officio Prefectus, are its spine. They are the best that humanity has to offer that have not already been transformed into Astartes. Some say that they are more worthy and redoubtable than any Space Marine aspirant, but are needed amongst the rank and file of the Guard as much as the Astartes are needed among the stars. They are essential to the survival of the Imperium. Some say their duty is heavier than even that of a chapter master. They are the human personification of the willpower, the will of humanity, its defiance, its resilience, its unquenchable steel. If you have heard my introduction to the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, then you will know of the catastrophic rebellion that was called the Horus Heresy, how it nearly tore humanity apart and shook the Imperium to its very core. From the ashes of this horrific civil war arose the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. So many of the Astartes, the Space Marines, had fallen that the needs for defense and the continued expansion of the Imperium forced the common humans to step up in a way that had not been required while the post-human legions of the Space Marines were at full numbers. Now humanity had to take up the sword and shield, the lasgun and the lander, the tithe and the tank. Humanity mobilized to defend itself. But the wounds of the heresy ran deep. There was no trust anymore amongst the wings of the newly forged Imperium. The Navy, Soldiery, and Adeptus Mechanicus were separated as never before, to avoid the temptation of rebellion, but they required a glue, a bonding agent, to bring it all back together. Also, the soldiery were broken into separate groups, tanks, cavalry, ordnance and infantry, all being in different regiments. They needed something that would gel them together and make the Imperium's armies run smoothly again. The command staff were as suspect as any, so it could not be them alone. Also, there was a need for pride, for drive, for unified purpose to be regained, all in the backdrop of everyone looking over their shoulders at their colleagues, their superiors, their underlings. Morale was devastated, and it was cried out for as it had never been before. And so it was decided. A new form of officer, one outside of the usual chain of command, yet one not actually in overall command, should be there. A person to stiffen the line, to inspire, but also to terrify. To terrify the Xenos, the heretic, or the mutant. But most of all, to terrify the traitor. Like a political or morale officer of ancient Terran history, the commissar was envisaged. For the best way to create harmony and unity was to create a force that would be feared by officer and private alike. The thing to gel the entire corps, from top to bottom, was a unifying fear. A fear of the Emperor. A fear of his hand-picked eyes and ears and judgment. And thus the commissariat began. For a commissar can execute anyone, and I mean anyone, in the Militarum on a whim. They are judge, jury, and executioner. Should they see, hear, or smell even a hint, a gesture, even a mild aroma of corruption, treachery, or even a lack of enough zeal, they will act immediately to stem the flow, to cut out the cause, to remove the offending party. Many an officer of luminous rank has found the last thing he hears to be the slide of a pistol being unsheathed before they were summarily executed on the spot. None can gainsay the commissar. None. Weep for him, for his faith was not sufficient. Rejoice for yourselves, for my faith is bottomless. Forward for the Emperor! After executing an officer, Commissar Krieglust. Their mere existence removes the need for officers or rankers to watch each other. They are immediately able to know that the man at their side can be trusted. The morale of the Imperial forces is now assured, for if the Commissar has not investigated or, more likely, executed or removed a person, then they are considered to be trustworthy and loyal. The warriors of the Imperium's Guard do not need to worry about betrayal or politics, in the main part, for the causes are removed very early. The commissariats see all. What is a commissar? Where did it come from? What do they actually do? Well, commissar is, simply put, one of the best that humanity can provide. They are shining paragons of martial ability, loyalty, faith, and courage. To be a commissar is to be a beacon of everything that best represents the Imperium. Only the very cream of the human military families can ever hope to enshrine the human spirit so much as to tear their way into that glorious order. For none are given a place amongst their number. It is fought for, it is bled for, it is earned, and it is not given, it is taken. Across the galaxy, there are a myriad of military institutions, but all come under the banner of the same regime, the same exacting standards and the same intensity of training, the Schola Progenium. Usually with an intake of purely orphans or children of the existing officers and elite of the Imperium's military, the intake is young. These scions of the military class are then put through years of intense and brutal training, forging them into the best that humanity can provide. A combination of West Point, Sandhurst, St. Cyr, or the General Staff Academy, these institutions have over 10,000 years of experience in taking a human being and reducing them, then rebuilding them into perfect weapons of war, leaders of legend, and commanders of confidence and skill. They are brutal and harsh places that are an absolute necessity to the existence of humanity. For they produce the leading lights that will eventually command and inspire the armies of humanity against the endless tides of Xenos, traitors, mutants, and heretics. They are trained to be of iron will, of lightning reflex, devoid of normal human mercy. They produce the best purely human soldiers the race has ever seen. Those who are strong in one particular field often get recruited into the most prestigious units in the Imperium. Zealous faithful can go to the Ecclesiarchy or the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. The martially excellent will be funneled into the Tempest Scions, the elite shock troopers of the Astra Militarum. The tactical and strategic savants will be groomed for command. Only those that excel at all skills are the epitome of the very best in every trait, with wills of iron, dazzling martial skill, and unshakable faith, the ability to inspire any and all around them. Only these, the very brightest lights of humanity, can even dream of being selected as a candidate to be a commissar. To quote, "I thought the acolytes of Khorne were supposed to be warriors, not a bunch of pansies." End quote. The training is hard, and only those who are worthy survive. Test upon test is undergone by the candidates to check every element of their skills and traits. On a regular basis, those who are found wanting will be released onto the grounds to then be hunted down by their erstwhile colleagues and compatriots. Young candidates will regularly be given orders that seem utterly devoid of purpose or meaning, or even a chance of success. Only those who enact those orders to the letter, without pausing for a heartbeat, without questioning even for a second, will be able to pass the tests. Brutality upon brutality is heaped upon these candidates. No boundary unchecked, no fortitude not confirmed, no faith unquestioned. All the while, instant execution await those who fail to match or surpass expectations. To even survive in this environment forges a being of a caliber not found amongst the standard soldiery of any regiment or organization, save the Astartes. When a commissar enters the room, all know that they stand in the presence of a survivor, an exemplar of the hardness that is required for the human race to survive in a galaxy where all seek the demise of us all. Every second of every day, somewhere in the galaxy, humanity is assailed by forces larger, more deadly, more vicious, more numerous, and often more warlike than humanity are innately. The only way to win in these circumstances is to become that, to become war. Commissars are every martial instinct, every military tradition, every particle of our experience boiled down and crafted into a single peerless example of humanity's will to endure and to prevail. When the ranks are about to break, when the enemy throws its most elite, most terrifying, most able warriors at the lines, then it is the commissar who strides forward to engage them, bolter to bolter, blade to blade, face to face. It is the commissar who is the embodiment of the will of the Emperor in his armed forces of the Guard, and they lead from the front. The responsibility of the commissar's mantle is a heavy one, so the shoulders that carry it must be as wide as an ocean and made of unbreakable steel. For under the hat there are many responsibilities. Not only is the commissar expected to be the first to engage the horrors that none other could match, they are also expected to be the first to catch the regimental flag when its bearer is shot, so it never touches the ground. They are expected to be the first to the breaches, the first to shout their hatred at an unassailable hardpoint, and lead the charge into hails of gunfire and deluges of bombardment. They are expected to spear the charge across a mine-infested field, and the first to leap the barbed wire protections of the enemy. A commissar is a hero of legend, a watchdog, leader, iterator, and punishing father, all rolled into one. But the other traits of the commissar are just as important. Should they execute an officer, then they are expected to immediately take up the reins of command and lead the troops at least as well as the person they have executed. They must be investigators and the greatest readers of men and women's hearts. They must know the signs of fear, of treason, of cowardice, of delay or corruption, and take immediate action. But they must also watch over their flocks like the shepherds of the ecclesiarchy. They must be able to communicate to every man and woman under their command. Commissars are never put in charge of regiments that hail from the same culture as they, so they must be amazingly intelligent and linguistically talented also, for the stars of the Imperium are almost without number, and the dialects and speech patterns of the myriad cultures that make up the regiments of the Astra Militarum are vast. One stationing could see them in charge of a company of barbaric, feral world savages, with the challenge will be to prevent them from decimating their own number in honor duels while enduring the captivity of long-distance transit. The next could see them in charge of a particularly dense and truculent unit of Ogrins, who require every last word to be translated into a childish simplicity. The next sees them in charge of a staunchly professional unit that requires every last thing to be a vocal order, but this could be due to a suspected cowardice, where following orders is actually a thinly veiled excuse for negligence and a lack of zeal. The trials of the commissar are many, for they must also be able to gain the respect, fear, and obedience of any formation to which they are attached. Their flexibility must match their steel. They are often those chosen to communicate with the enemy, an enemy that could be a feline-like, subtle Eldar envoy, a hulking green-skinned war boss, or a twisted lord of chaos. They must always be willing to stand toe-to-toe with these creatures, these demigods and twisted demons, these Goliaths, and be willing to spit in their eye so their example can light the fires of pride and grit in the men and women who they represent. To quote, "You would laugh, monster, but let me remind you, within that weak sack of meat and bone, uncared for by his God and wept for by none, beats a heart, a human heart, that carries with it the strength and courage of all mankind. Within that sack of meat is ensconced the hope, the will, and the fury of every man, woman, and child from every corner of the Imperium. Within that weak sack of meat, festooned in thin armour and weapons only powerful in numbers, beats the heart of a man, and for 10,000 years the hearts of men have beaten strongly in defiance of your so-called powers. For 10,000 years the hearts of men have stood united against a galaxy that despises them for no reason save that they had the audacity not to lay down and die. For 10,000 years your black crusades have been pushed back, beaten down, and made a mockery of by weak sacks of flesh with cheap weapons and disposable equipment. For that weak sack of flesh that you so gleefully mock is no super soldier, no immortal warrior, no creature cursed by chaos like you. He is a man. An Imperial guardsman, drawn from some forgotten corner of the Imperium to fight for his species and for the safety of the people he loves. He is a factory worker, a farmer, a storekeeper, a father, a brother, a son, a mere man. And against creatures like you, teeming and numberless, powered by the very will of thirsting gods, he holds the line. He has held the line for 10,000 years. So what's your excuse, monster? End quote. Where the ecclesiarchy must ensure the faith of the soldiery, it is the job of the commissar to ensure their discipline, morale, and fighting zeal are also of exemplary levels. A commissar is just as likely to patrol the night camps of a regiment about to go into battle, with cheering and encouraging words and their presence. Like a futuristic Henry V amongst their men, they make sure that their steel is honed, their spirits high, their hunger to exact revenge on the enemy a palpable and breathing thing. They must stoke the fires of anger and wrath in the soldiers under their protection, and they must make sure that the soldiery know that they are not only protected by the Emperor, but they are also watched by him. They require to be able to infuse zeal for battles which most will never return from, battles which may see entire regiments wiped out to a man. They must clean the minds and morale of those under them, as those same men and women would field strip a lasgun or a heavy weapon. They must hone them into a lethal killing edge, without pushing them over the line into confusion or unthinking rage. They must fill them with pride. They must fill their charges with the kind of courage and steel that it is almost unfathomable to those of our time. To quote, "I have a reputation, no doubt, a reputation as a fair, honest man who treats his soldiers well and supports them in the face of darkness. Potentially, that reputation makes me soft. It seems I understand failure and forgive it. Some, like Cowell, believe me to be a weak commissar, not prepared to take the action my rank demands, not prepared to enforce field discipline where I see it failing. I am an Imperial commissar. I will inflame the weak, support the wavering, guide the lost. I will be all things to all men who need me, but I will also punish, without hesitation, the incompetent, the cowardly, and the treasonous." Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt, 10th First and Only. To quote, "I do not expect you to win this battle. That is not your concern. That is the concern of the commanders of this war. I do not expect you to win this battle. I just expect you to fight it. Fight for the Imperium, for the Emperor, for your very soul. But fight." Commissar Rickard. Lord Commissars. Amongst the ranks of the Officio Prefectus there are many heroic individuals who have become legendary through their deeds. Some of these paragons may achieve the rank of Lord Commissar, where a commissar will be attached as an ancillary officer to a company, fulfilling his charge under the tactical direction of the company commander. A Lord Commissar will often lead the soldiers he oversees into battle. In this role, he is more than capable. After decades of service within multiple regiments, a Lord Commissar has experienced firsthand the various ways in which the strengths of the Astra Militarum can be put to effective use. A Lord Commissar may be placed in command of soldiers about to enter a particularly nightmarish war zone. At other times, he will assume the position of senior officer after executing the standing company commander, whom he has judged and found wanting. A Lord Commissar is expected to exemplify everything the Imperium strives toward, while still discharging his duties as a grim-faced arbiter of disciplinary retribution. Each is a fearsome warrior whose skill and experience in frontline combat makes them the match of heretical demagogues and Xenos warlords on the battlefield. As military leaders, they can appraise the battle lines of the company as swiftly as they measure the mettle of their troops, punishing any weakness they see with merciless expedience. I would like to read an entry on Commissar Yarrick, one of the most famous of all of the commissariat. Commissar Yarrick, hero of Hades' Hive. To quote, "Commissar Yarrick is a peerless Imperial hero. During the Second War for Armageddon, Yarrick held Hades' Hive against the orc hordes of Warlord Ghazghul Thraka when the city's fall seemed inevitable. As the legends tell, it was this act of stoic defiance that would save the planet, for in Yarrick, the green-skinned warlord saw a worthy opponent, a strategist of great cunning against whom he could test his brutal fury. Ghazghkull directed the majority of his forces towards Hades' hive, and joined the battle himself, determined to crush the dauntless commissar beneath his heel. Yarrick rallied his defenders, and though the casualties were horrific, he managed to hold out until the Blood Angels chapter of the Adeptus Astartes were able to outflank and destroy Ghazghkull's horde. Furious at his defeat, the warlord retreated from the system, ending the Second War for Armageddon. Yarrick's courage and tenacity were an inspiration to his fellows, carrying them through hardships untold to eventual victory. It was during a brutal hand-to-hand duel with the hulking warboss Ulgard in the final battle for Hades' hive that Yarrick lost an arm. He took the orc's head in return, replacing his severed limb with Uglhard's own power claw. When he lost an eye in a vicious firefight, Yarrick ensured it was replaced with a powerful laser bionic, playing to the orc's fears of his supposed evil eye. Though his body is a patchwork of scars and bionics, the old commissar fights on unbowed. When Ghazghkull's mighty War returned once more to the planet, instigating the Third War for Armageddon, Yarrick came out of a well-earned retirement to lead the planet's defences. None in the Imperium knew the deranged mind of the Orc warlord better, and the aged commissar was able to counter all but the most outlandish assaults devised by the green-skinned prophet. Cataclysmic and ongoing war that ensued stretched the military capacity of the Adeptus Ministorum to near breaking point. Suffice it to say that for all of the ferocity and ingenuity of the Orc warlord, Armageddon did not fall. The Imperial forces withstood the invaders, though the planet was transformed into a brutal, unending war zone. Eventually, Ghazghkull himself was drawn away by a vision, which he believed was given to him by the green-skinned gods themselves. Unwilling to let his nemesis escape only to potentially wreak havoc elsewhere in the galaxy, Yarrick ensured that he was among the Imperial forces who gave chase. Without the tireless effort of Commissar Yarrick, Ghazghkull's War would have overrun Armageddon long ago and stormed on towards Terra. The Commissar's crusade to slay the beast of Armageddon continues to this day. The soldiers of the Guard can be faced with an entire moving landscape, covered with a horde of greenskins or Tyranids, charging directly at them, all perfectly able to make a bloody mess of a score of Guard if they merely make it to close combat. The Commissar must be the one to make sure that the men have the steel to make their stand. For if but one man breaks and runs, it can cause a tidal wave of panic that will sweep the entire army away. In most wars, the Guard has only one chance at survival: if they stand and fire until the enemy breaks. When unholy beams tear entire columns of Astra Militarum to pieces, or turns them to smoking ash, weapons honed over millions of years of butchery, it is the Commissar who must ensure that the Guards do not ever feel the slightest whiff of uncertainty, or the smallest crack in the confidence of the command staff. The Commissar must make men ignore their very senses, to ignore the carnage and brutality of what they are enduring, and focus them into one purpose only: to stand and to fight to the last. The pressure on the Commissar is unbelievable, so only those forged into steel can possibly take on the burden. For they are not glorified standard bearers. They are not glorified executioners or blinkered morons. A Commissar knows the situation and survival chances of his men better than even the commanders in most situations. They are the best of the best. For if one, just one, of these mighty warriors were to turn tail and run, if even one in all of the history of the Imperium were to give in to their human instincts and flee, then the very heart of the Imperium would be broken. The illusion of strength would be destroyed. The spell would be unravelled. It is with this burden the Commissar carries their duties through the long years, throughout every last war that the Imperium has fought in over 10,000 years. For if even one commissar ever were to break and run, the tale would spread like wildfire, would run from its point of origin to every corner in the Imperium. If even one commissar were to ever break, the Imperium itself would fall. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed my brief introduction to the Commissars, then do please consider liking and subscribing. If so, then please do remember to press the notifications button. I would not wish you to miss out.